So I'm going to try to explain a little bit about viruses and the microbiome and the current pandemic and my perspective on why we need to not be so alarmed and why a vaccination toward this is not a good idea. So essentially, since the beginning of biology, DNA has been involved, and that is the genetics of how biology codes for information. And that microbiome is within us and is us in the sense that we are nothing but an evolved microbiome into a higher order, a higher matrix, a higher organism that is human. And we must live with all of the microbiome in all forms that it exists in, including all of the genetics. So viral genetics and bacterial genetics and human genetics are really all the same genetics because it's the code of biology. And when the first molecular biologists saw the bacteriophages, or the viral particles that were infecting the bacteria and causing some shift in the environment, they thought it was infection. But that's because they were looking at this from the same lens as thinking that all microbes are either normal or infectious. And what I'm purporting is that microbes shift depending on the need and the field and the condition and the emotional states of a being, a human, a person, even all the way back to the beginning of creation, because it's all consciousness and everything is essentially felt experience. So when we look at it this way, in the entirety of the whole holistic view, in space and in time and in from an evolutionary standpoint, the viral code, which is what a virus is just code in a capsid. It's not living. It's just genetic information. And when an organism, human, animal, or otherwise, throws off old code, it's just a genetic shift. So viral bacteriophages, microbiome shifts are reflecting what is in our body and being. If you are someone who harbors a lot of viruses, you're someone whose immune system isn't working properly because there's part of your body and being that has not accepted, processed, fully felt and experienced something from the past, or perhaps your previous infections, quote unquote, illnesses in childhood were not treated correctly because you weren't able to throw off the toxicity that the microbiome was trying to throw off for you, and the medical community misinterpreted it as an infection and gave you an antibiotic. So in order to actually correct this, you have to go back through and face your past, whether it's medical treatment, emotional conditions, or both usually, that have not been fully felt and fully brought through the state of what we call in a spiritual mindset, boga. It's the bogue that's coming up to leave you that has to come through also on the physical body. So what natural medicine does, what we do to support the immune system, is we facilitate and participate and promote the completion of an incomplete process. So the vaccines will just confuse the immune system. When you inject a person with an attenuated virus, you are violating the natural barriers of the skin, of the microbiome, of the mucosa, and you're then confusing between what is me and what isn't me, and then you end up having a paralysis effect, or maybe you trigger the body to make an antibody against that one thing, but it paralyzes the rest of the normal immune process to diversify into a multiplicity that could never be replicated in a pharmaceutical lab. And then you add in neurotoxins and you drive a suppression of toxicants deeper into the person's body and being, and then you start to see more neurological disease, OCD, Tourette's, strep throat, strep infections, the gamut as it goes on and on, the further and more aggressive you suppress, to even having, multiple sclerosis and neuroendocrine cancers. So this is just a progression of suppression as well as a de-escalation of that progression as we clear it out. And then when it comes to the new mRNA vaccines, these are immune therapies. These are not actually vaccines, they're immune therapies. They've only ever been used in cancer. So this is something that's completely inappropriate to use in a person whose immune system is already broken. So if you've listened to everything I've already said in this video, most people's immune systems are struggling because they are burdened with the toxicants that we've spilled all throughout the environment, and that's what I meant by processing earlier. If you haven't processed those toxicants, your body and being is burdened by that. And likewise, if you haven't processed old feelings and old traumas, or there are circumstances you are not accepting, these are old illnesses and suppressed illnesses that we have to move through in order to release and resolve and let go. So illness is essentially a shift into a new being. Acute illness especially is what I mean. And acute illness is an opportunity for you to unload all of this, but only if you treat it correctly. And treating it correctly essentially means you're resolving it through vibrational treatments, feeling states,